Hello, everybody, and welcome back to episode 2 of the American Speed F1 podcast, a European sport from the perspective of an American guy. I am your host, Anthony Doria here. We're back. We took a 1-week hiatus due to winter break, but we are now back with episode 2. If you haven't already watched episode 1, which is kind of just an intro about me and how I got in F1, please go watch that. It's on Spotify at American Speed F1 podcast and on YouTube at the Dead Podcast Society page. You will see it there. So we got a lot to get into. Obviously, we have missed 2 races. The F1 season is coming to a close, and we have 2025 in 3 months. So to start off this show, in this show, we'll be doing a recap. We'll be recapping the Las Vegas and Qatar Grand Prix, which are the Grand Prix I missed and we're not able to cover. Well, I missed Las Vegas. Qatar happened last week, so I didn't miss that. And we'll be going over some of the. We'll be going over the first 2 practices from earlier today at Marina in Abu Dhabi. And then we'll just, at the end, we'll kind of just go over what my takes have been in the season, because obviously we know the season is going to end, and just kind of how the driver changes are maybe going to affect and who I maybe think is going to be, who's going to be up there. So first off, we'll start off with the first race of the 2, which was the Las Vegas Grand Prix. So this was the second year that F1 would go to Las Vegas. And it definitely was a very good race. So we'll get into the recap right now. So, and obviously, if you may have already known, Max Verstappen, this was the race where he officially became a 4-time champion, as he came from 5th on the grid during that Saturday night Grand Prix, while the pole sitter, who was George Russell, and Lewis Hamilton, earned a 1-2 finish for Mercedes. Now, obviously, as I said, so Max finished 5th, and George Russell and Lewis Hamilton got 1-2. We'll talk more about the Hamilton drive later, as you said there. So we'll get more into that in a couple minutes. So Verstappen entered this race. He entered the race, and all he needed to do was beat Lando. I believe it was, I don't know if it was like required points total, but all I know is that Verstappen went into this race having to beat Lando, and I was pretty confident if he beat him in any capacity, like even if it was by like 1 position, he was going to beat him. So he was in a very good spot nonetheless. He really just had to beat him, which the Red Bull did look a bit better than McLaren. McLaren did have a bit of struggles at like the kind of really high speed tracks. So it was very kind of knowing that we were probably going to see Max win it, and which is what he did, unfortunately. And so the Dutchman actively, he really just held position for the first corner, and he just gradually pulled away. And just Lando Norris McLaren was just not able to keep up with the Red Bull, and it was enough to have Verstappen claim his 4th straight title, going all the way back to 2021. So the way he did this is Verstappen, he held the podium spot after the second round of pit stops, and he opted to fight against when the Ferraris arrived at the rear of his Red Bull in the closing laps, which was Sainz and Leclerc, who I believe finished right behind him. So both Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc finding a way past him before the checkered flag. So both of those drivers were able to find a way past, as Sainz was 3rd and Leclerc was 4th. Now, if we go to the front, we had Russell, who this year definitely has showed that he's a very expert at managing a tricky race, especially with tires. And he definitely showed that this week, as he was able to keep Leclerc, who I believe started 2nd. He kept him at very early laps, and in the later running, tire troubles because of the aggression, and Leclerc he just fell back and could not keep up with Russell. I don't know, but I feel like that was a problem that, Leclerc always kind of had this year. Is it seems like sometimes he gets too aggressive and he just kind of drains the tires. Because I've always noticed that. Like, you ever notice like when he's like fighting for the lead, and he does it, and then eventually he'll just fall all the way back because he just drains the tires because he never can buy them. I have noticed that, so we'll talk more about that. Anyway, so then, and Hamilton, who originally started this race in P10, he had an incredible drive, bounced all the way back from a bad qualifying, and he fought through the field and got to 2nd place, and this would mark Mercedes' first, and this win from Russell, would mark the first Mercedes triumph since that July of Belgium. So that was their first race, which was Belgium. Kind of nice to see Mercedes actually kind of getting multiple wins here and there. Obviously, not to the point they were in 2021 and the years before that, but definitely it's nice to see that they actually won multiple races this year and that they're actually kind of heading in the right direction now. And obviously, we'll probably get more into the like Hamilton and Mercedes stuff probably next episode when the official season comes to a close, because obviously there's still 1 race left. Now, Now, while Norris did lose the championship, he did make a very successful bid for the fastest lap in the dying moments as he took 6th place and mathematically dropped out of the championship contention. And teammate Oscar Piastri would cross the finish line 7th after a time penalty that he had for a false start at the beginning of the race. And shout out to Haas driver Nico Hülkenberg, who he was able to pass Tsunoda late on, which could be, and this also could be crucial for the constructors battle because obviously, as we all know, Racing Bulls and Haas are fighting for P6, which is kind of the best of the rest. Because, Aston's P5 is still kind of best of the rest, so this is like kind of the best of the back markers, I guess. And it definitely helped Haas a bit because Pierre Gasly was on the 2nd row, and but unfortunately he suffered damage. He had technical trouble and he had to retire. But so I actually want to see what actually is the standings. Let me see here. So speaking of that fight with So right now, Haas is winning that battle between RB, and they have. So Alpine is in 6th right now at 59 points. Haas is 54. So Haas is going to the last race with that. So that's just to clarify kind of where they were with that battle. So that was for. So those are pieces of those because those are the 3 teams battling for P6. It looks like Alpine's going to get it. I think Alpine had a good second half of the year to try to get it. I mean, Haas still has a chance, and they got one race to do it, so we'll see what happens with that. And Sergio Perez was able to get a point to 10th, but still, nonetheless, a very disappointing weekend for him. And he was able to deny Fernando Alonso, who tried a one-stop and didn't work. Aston Martin continues with the struggles there. And Kevin Magnussen for Haas, he would finish 12th. And Kick Sauber's Zhou Guanyu and Williams of Franco Colapinto, who started in the pit lane following his scary qualifying crash. They were 13th and 14th. So, decent race for Zhou Guanyu and the Sauber. It seemed like this race, they kind of were actually going the right direction. They actually had a car that was competitive and not in the back. So it was definitely good there. I mean, Colapinto couldn't really do much. So he decent McCarthy drive, all things considered. Then it was Lance Stroll, Liam Lawson, Esteban Ocon, and Valtteri Bottas were the final finishers. And Alex Albon was the other retirement besides Gasly, as he had also technical troubles of him by himself. And all that attention was on Verstappen. We returned to Parc Ferme as he was doing all the celebrations, and he officially became the F1 4-time champion. So he joins his fellow Red Bull compatriot of Vettel. Both. It's actually funny. Both 4-time champions for Red Bulls were 4 years back, all straight 4 years. So that's actually kind of coincidence. Actually, I know that. I think that was actually mentioned somewhere was that fact. So yeah, that really concludes that. So now we'll go into a bit more detail of how that happened. All right, so now we'll go over a bit of recap, but kind of more specifically how all this went down. So that was kind of the general recap. So first off, when the lights went out, you had Pole Sitter Russell, who had a very clean getaway, and he held the lead into turn 1. And Leclerc was P4. He got all the way to P2, and because he cleared Gasly and Sainz through 1 and 2. So Charles Leclerc definitely has had a very good start this year. I mean, we know in Austin was kind of how he won that race because he went from 4th to 1st in the first turn. And Verstappen and Norris were raising heats because they actually were starting P5 and P6, and they had Tsunoda, Hülkenberg, Piastri, and Hamilton right behind them, as Lawson and Magnussen were having the battle of their own there. And so we go to lap 4. Leclerc was all over the back of Russell. He was definitely very close to pulling off that move at turn 14, but Verstappen would slip past him, get P4, and the Mercedes-man was forced to go defensive through turn 1 at the start of lap 5, as he wanted to keep him behind. And, I mean, Alonso, he definitely did good. I mean, he had several gain spots at the beginning of that race, but unfortunately the gamble that he had with the one-stop seemed to backfire as the tires were not holding up, and he was just outside the point. So, I mean, and as I said before, I mean, Leclerc had a very strong start, but unfortunately his pace would dramatically drop off after that as he allowed Sainz and Verstappen to get by him, and ultimately he finished 4th, being 2nd when he was kind of right where Russell was. So then we go to the first round pit stops, only 10 laps in. We had Leclerc would pit to get off the mediums to go to a set of hards, and Norris would join him as well. And then 1 lap later, we would have Sainz, Gasly, Tsunoda, and Piastri, who did the exact same thing, went to mediums to hards, which left Russell and Verstappen on their own, and that would promote Hamilton to 3rd place at the time. So then Verstappen would change to his hards. He would go 1 lap later on lap 12. And so he would be joined with he had a gaggle of midfield cars behind him, but he was crucially in front of both Ferraris, and he was ahead of Norris. So Red Bull strategy did very well there. And then we had Russell, who been on lap 13, and which then would release him, and because Hamilton he had to stop yet, and Perez and Hulkenberg were the last two guys that did not pit yet. Then we go a few laps later with the rest of the front runners having pitted. Russell would move back into P1 over everybody, and Hamilton was now behind the pack. And it seemed like the strategy was working for him, but he was told that he could have dropped if he would have stayed longer. So it seemed like the strategy, he didn't think it would work, but we'll get more to why it did. And then obviously the pain for Gasly struck, as he would lose power from the back of his Alpine as smoke would come out of it. And then starting P3, and he had to go to the pit lane. So that was very painful for Gasly, because it seems like he always has such good qualifying, but just can never get rewarded for him. I mean, I think Alpine is going the right direction now. I mean, like, they don't seem like they're going backwards. Like, they're definitely not as bad as they were at the beginning of the year. So it's like, I don't think Alpine will be bad next year, but that'll definitely mean something. Then we go to the halfway mark. Russell was 10 seconds clear of Verstappen, which he was followed by both Ferraris and Hamilton. Norris would be sixth, with Tsunoda, Piastri, Hulkenberg, and recovering Albon holding the final points at that time. Ocon and Alonso would soon confirm that the one-stop would not work. And now, while Albon was on the same strategy, he'd be terminal as he had a technical issue. So then we go on. And we go to a bit further back. Kind of one of the incidents of this race was when Lawson and Ocon in turn 3, as there would be no penalties, as they viewed it just a racing incident. Then ultimately we go on to there. And also, I mean, now one other thing that in this race was that Sergio Perez did have a very nice double pass. Unfortunately, it was for P10. So don't get me wrong, definitely a very nice pass, but you got to keep in mind it was only for P10 and 10th place in a Red Bull. So then we go on. Race just kind of played out from there, and then ultimately Verstappen would win it. So that's your recap of. So that was your recap of the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Now we're going to go on to the Qatar Grand Prix, which was the week after that. So this race was a bit crazier, as Max Verstappen would get back-to-back wins in a very, very eventful Qatar Grand Prix. And this was a race that featured 3 safety cars, so we'll definitely more to that now. A lot of crashes and a very penalty about Lando Norris that a lot of people are talking about, so we'll get into that. So, all right, so we'll be going over this. So we'll have the race recap here, because this was a crazy race. Like, so we'll go into as it happened. So this will be a recap of the race, kind of showing what happened, because this race is going to be detailed, so you kind of got to know. All right, so after qualifying, to start off, there was one key change that I'm sure a lot of you knew, was that Verstappen, he was handed who was originally on pole position. He was demoted down to second place after being handed a penalty, as he was viewed for driving unnecessarily slow on his cooldown lap in the session, an incident that forced Russell to take a avoid action. Now, keep that in your minds. Have that, because that specific event will be coming back a bit later. So remember that, because this race, and it's still going on right now. So just stay with me on that one. So anyway, this would promote the second place Russell, as he would then start P1, and Verstappen would be alongside him in P2 in the front row. And then that's how our starting grid happened. Now, so then we have lights go out, and we have Verstappen and Russell, who both got away very, very well. But it was Verstappen who held the racing line, and he did look to have the lead in the initial moments by watching this. And meanwhile, Norris was also wanting to get involved, but Max would stay in front, as he led the way with Norris and Russell. So Norris would get into second, and Russell would be at P3. There was that went on later in the back, however, as Hulkenberg would go wide and make contact with Ocon, which then caused the Alpine to hit the Williams of Franco Colapinto, and this immediately would put Ocon and Colapinto out of the running, triggering the safety car on only the first lap to come out. while Hülkenberg visited the pits and managed to continue, though the German was noted by race control as they viewed he allegedly caused that collision on that. So now, on a Colapinto, his teammate Albon suffered a spin after receiving a tap from Stroll, but they were both also able to stay in the running, despite the Aston Martin having to make a pit stop due to that. And the start had been better for some, though, with Perez, who was in 14th originally, was able to get to 10th place. Excuse me, no. Perez would go up from 9th to 7th, and Tsunoda, he made also big gains as he went from 14th to 10th. Now, after the safety car would go in on lap 5, Verstappen had a great racer, as he typically always does on the safety cars, and he held the lead while Piastri was able to pick off Leclerc for 4th. And then we would have Lawson, who then spun off the track into turn 1, which would drop the RB to the back of the pack in 18th place. So now Alonso, meanwhile, he fell into the clutches of Hamilton and Tsunoda, and that would leave that horrible Aston Martin on the straight. And so, yeah, that would pretty much leave him on the straight, a sitting duck, as the Aston Martin has never really been known for its straight line speed, and he would get past there. Well, the good thing for Aston Martin that there wasn't any further trouble when Stroll was into the pits as he went to retire the car on lap 8. But then he was hit with a 10-second time penalty for his collision that he had earlier with Albon, which would then promote the Canadian to return to the action, but the team's problems weren't over, with Alonso, who is then noted for rejoining the track unsafely. So safe to say the stewards were definitely kept very busy in this race, as the next incident was a potential false start by Hamilton. So now when you watch the replays, it showed that the Mercedes seemingly was moving early before stopping and then going again. So obviously, if you don't watch F1, essentially there's a start. You might see on the TV that there's five lights. There's 5 red lights, and essentially they all go off. Now the timing could vary, but essentially their cue to go is when the lights turn green. So it's kind of like traffic lights. You have the red light, but when it goes green, that indicates to start. So essentially what this means is that what this penalty is saying is that they believe that Hamilton started early and jumped it, as they would say it. He jumped it before the light went green, or he moved, stopped, and then moved again, but obviously he still moved when the lights were not green. So that's essentially what that is referring to, if you didn't already know. So then obviously, as I said, replays would show that. And Hamilton would be heard. They show the radio clip, and he would say that, and he would obviously say sorry to his team. But then Stroll, meanwhile, had now retired from the race. He served the penalty, then he retired. So that's the third retirement, I believe. But that wasn't over yet. There was still plenty of action down the field, as we would see a very, very great battle with Magnussen and Tsunoda as they would fight for P9. And a scrap that was won by Magnussen. Now remember, obviously, as I said earlier, Haas and RB are fighting for the Constructors' Championship right now, so that was very big for them. I believe that's where Magnussen finished in P9, I believe. Verstappen would be in the lead. He pretty much was the whole race, and he was 2 seconds ahead of Norris, while Piastri was trying to get to Russell in 3rd. And the Ferraris of Leclerc and Sainz were followed in 4th. The Ferraris were in 5th and 6th for Leclerc and Sainz. So, as we said, with Haas, Alpine, and RB, who are still vying for the 6th in the Constructors' Championship, which Alpine is currently leading at 59 points. Haas has 54. And I believe RB is at 46 points. So then, but because of that, Gasly would help the Alpine bid for that, as he would overtake Tsunoda, and then Tsunoda would then lose another spot to Alonso. Now, unfortunately, the other RB driver, Liam Lawson, who just got there recently after Ricciardo, would not be so lucky, as he was handed a 10-second time penalty for causing a collision with Valtteri Bottas in the Kick Sauber, while Hamilton was also given a 5-second for that false start. So, as I said, the FIA viewed it, the stewards viewed it, and they would give both a penalty for the false start. So usually, and in case you're wondering about the times, usually there's different times which tend to kind of vary on what the incident is. So obviously, false start is 5 seconds, and a collision is typically 10 seconds. So there's usually times they usually go up based on how the penalty value would go up based on how, I guess, aggressive or how bad it is. Usually anything with crashes is more than 10 seconds. Anyway, continuing. So Norris had set the fastest lap of the race, which was on lap 17, but Verstappen was still leading by 1.7 seconds. And then we go a bit further back. Leclerc had asked his team to kind of check the pressures on his tires as he was remaining 2 seconds off Piastri in the fight for fourth, while Russell was still in third place at the time. So then as we get to lap 22, it seemed like the pit stop window was going to be open with Verstappen and Norris both pushing as they were managing, so people would think it was. But unfortunately, the gap was still stood around 2 seconds, and an undercut looked to be out of the question because McLaren were not close enough to pull that off. But then we go to the other McLaren. Piastri, meanwhile, he was right with Russell as the Australian was able to close the gap to less than 1 second, which would then open his DRS, before then being released after the Britain because of the first front runners to pit on lap 24, as he had a slow stop as he had a hard stop for pitting for the hard tires, which are dropping down to P11 in the order and a bit of traffic. So definitely not good there. And so with that pit stop, no one else really in the front really seemed to follow suit. And Piastri was now making the most of his clean air that he was now given to him. But unfortunately, Russell, the same could not be said for him, as he found himself unable to find a way past Alonso in a battle for P10. And so the Mercedes, as I said, hard tires did not seem to be working out very well for Russell, as the Mercedes was remaining stuck behind Alonso as lap 30 arrived. And elsewhere, we would have yellow flags were thrown when a wing mirror looked to be on the main straight, with replay showing that it had been dropped off by Albon's Williams. So keep that in mind for a second, because that's actually going to mean something. So Verstappen, meanwhile, So as I said, this is going to mean something. So Verstappen would ask his engineer if Norris had lifted in the yellow flag zone, because the rule is the yellow flag, you're supposed to lift off and not overtake. You're supposed to slow down and not overtake anybody. With the response from his team being that the McLaren did not do this, because the gap between the former title rivals now stood at around 2 seconds. So it was closing. But then we go to the replays, and it showed that Bottas ran over the wing mirror, which seemingly scattered it into small pieces of debris, and it was all over the track, as Hamilton and Sainz would both suffer a puncture and had to go back to the pits because of this wing mirror. And Sainz a slow stop, dropping down to 10th, while Hamilton was now in 16th place. So the safety car was soon deployed due to this debris, which then resulted in the rest of the pack making all the pit stops, obviously. And so obviously Verstappen would remain in the lead from Norris and Leclerc, while Piastri had dropped a place to fourth after making his own pit stop just before it. So if you're wondering how he dropped, because when the safety car comes out, people kind of view it as like a free pit stop because everybody slows down and you have to regroup. So it's kind of like a free pit stop because at the end of the day, you're going to go back to the field. You're going to be bunched up. So it's good for them. And obviously Piastri wasn't good because he pitted just before it. So it's almost like if he waited on a lap, he could have been a bit better off. So Russell, he would make his second stop amidst all of this, but he was very furious with himself about the tires that had been bolted onto it. And he also, because you could definitely tell, like in the post race interviews, that he definitely was very upset with the tire choice by Mercedes. It seems like they've kind of had those a couple times this year. So then we have the safety car leading the pack through the pit lane while debris was getting cleared. So then Norris would then state that he believed he had been brake tested by Hamilton after the Mercedes would appear to hit his brakes late on entry. Norris, remember what happened the last time that someone thought Hamilton brake checked them? Yeah, you don't want to repeat of that. If you're an F1 fan, you know what that means. But if you don't, I'm referring to Azerbaijan 2017 when Hamilton did that. When Hamilton and Vettel would do that. And I believe Vettel got a penalty and lost the race because of that. So that's what I'm referring to. So we don't want that again. I don't believe that anything happened. So anyway, racing would resume on lap 39 with a good restart, as Norris would go side by side with Verstappen before having to back out. And Leclerc and Piastri also had some good action there. And ultimately, that's how the Ferrari would be able to stay ahead of that. Though, as we've seen before, there was some trouble with Sergio Perez, who would have a spin and ended up out of the running just as Hulkenberg also became beached in the gravel after experiencing a snap in his Haas, with all of this bringing out the safety car back out for its third appearance of the day. So, I mean, once again, the struggles for Perez just continue to be seen. Now, we will get a bit more into that at the end of the show when we talk about the LSOs and all that. So anyway, that would bring out the third safety car of the race. Now, as I said earlier, Norris would be under investigation for failing to slow down under the yellow flags during that earlier incident, as we said earlier, when Red Bull thought he didn't slow down. The safety car then headed back into the pits on lap 43. So I believe there would have been, I think there would have been 8 laps out, I believe, because I believe the Qatar's how many is Qatar 56? I believe, I think so. So toward the end of the race, but could Norris make a move though? Was the question. And as it was last time, it was no. Verstappen would hold the lead, and McLaren would face pressure from Leclerc. So now we have behind that trio, we would have Piastri, Russell, Gasly, Sainz, Alonso, Zhou, and Albon, which complete the top 10 order. But unfortunately, bad news for Norris, as he would be hit with a 10-second stop-and-go penalty for that yellow flag offense, which then he would have to go into the pit and serve. Now this incident in particular has had, kind of a live discussion about it. Because what I did see somewhere that this actually is the normal thing that they would give someone, but because when you look at the replay, like the yellow flag came out like really late, so there's kind of the argument that maybe he didn't see it, but then the other side was saying, well, Max saw it, so it's like it was kind of debate, but at the end of the day, that most people reported that is the normal time limit someone would get for that offense, as it's usually what other people have gotten. So, I think it's fair. True, it was a bit late on his end, but he still should slow down. He still should be able to look up and see it. So I do think it's fair. So as a result of this would drop Norris back all the way down to P15, which would have big implications for McLaren's bid for the Constructors' Championship, as there's still a battle between it. And another guy was Hamilton, as a 7-time champion, would receive a drive-through penalty for speeding in the pit lane. Now, I'll get more into that because I actually saw a video about this. I'll get into that in a minute. Anyway, after he served it, Hamilton asked if he could retire the car, but they encouraged him to stay out, as he was now behind Norris at the rear of the pack. And there was still a lot of fights going on that looked to score a lot of points, with Albon having to defend against Bottas as the Kick Sauber battled to join his teammate in the top 10. Now, the Finn, he would get through on lap 54, but Norris was on his tail after overtaking the Williams. But Albon's woes were added when he received a 10-second time penalty for causing a collision with Magnussen at the earlier restart, and his future teammate Carlos Sainz was busy trying to catch Gasly for 5th. As the race was nearing its close, there was further work for the stewards, as Russell was noted for a safety car infringement, but there were no worries up ahead for Verstappen, who crossed the line to take his 9th win of the season by 6 seconds from Charles Leclerc. So Piastri was just behind them in 3rd, rounding off the podium, with Russell took 4th. His subsequent 5-second penalty for the safety car infringement would not affect his position, and Gasly held off Sainz to claim 5th in what would be a great result for Alpine in the Constructors' Championship, which would move them to P6. Sainz was then followed by Alonso in P7, ahead of Zhou, scoring Kick Sauber's first points of the year with a solid PA finish. So great job for Zhou. Magnussen would seal 2 points for Haas in 9th, with Norris recovering 1 point in 10th, meaning that McLaren's bid for the constructors will now go down to the wire in Abu Dhabi. Bottas, unfortunately, would just miss out on the top 10 result in P11, ahead of Hamilton, and a challenge day for him, as he would be in 12th. Tsunoda, Lawson, and Albon were the final classified finishers from 13th to 15th, respectively, and Hülkenberg, Perez, Stroll, Colapinto, and Ocon were the 5 retirees. So there's your race recap for Qatar. Crazy race. But also, shout out to Zhou for getting those points for Kick Sauber, man. It was a tough year for them. Obviously, we know he's leaving the team too, as they have Hülkenberg and Gabriele Bortoleto coming in. So, kind of a nice way for him to, just hold his head high, knowing that he scored points every single year in F1. He scored every points in a year, got 2 PA finishes in his career, so he can hold his high. He can hold his head high on that. So very good job for him. But yeah, crazy race. Kind of say I couldn't watch this one, but it was certainly crazy because I had to drive back home because I was from Michigan. But very crazy race. Congrats to Max again, 9th win in the season. Won the championship. It was a good fight. People put up a fight against him, but just no one could touch him. Like when Verstappen's in a group, you're not going to catch him. That's pretty certain. So as your recap for the last two. So now we'll do a quick. So now to add into the constructors battles, now we do have a lot of constructors battles going on right now. As obviously we have McLaren is in first place at 640 points. We have Ferrari at 619, and Red Bull at 581. Now Red Bull, I believe it was after Qatar were officially eliminated from the constructors battle because Perez was not able to get enough points for them. And then the other one we have is P6, as I said, between Alpine, Haas, and RB. As Alpine, as I said, 59 points, Haas 54, and RB has 46. And then the last two teams, Williams has 17 points, Kick Sauber has 4. So, but listen, Kick Sauber, great job. I mean, now this is the third straight year. 2021 was the last time the team was scoreless, which was Haas in 2021. So this is the third straight year that every team has scored points. Yeah, but watching the Kick Sauber celebrations was just amazing to see. Like especially Zhou's reaction to it. I mean, he got driver of the day, absolutely well deserved. I mean, it probably does feel a bit bittersweet for him because he just knowing that he's not coming back next year. Now there have been a lot of reports that he is going to be Ferrari's reserve driver. Now we cannot confirm that. That's been a lot of the rumors because he was related to Ferrari back in the day, I think. Because I know in F2 he was with he was with Renault in F2, like he was one of their academy. So I don't know if he was related to Ferrari. I feel like he was. I don't know why. I have a strange feeling he was. I don't know, but that's what it seems like he is because obviously he's driven for Alfa Romeo or Sauber, which is a Ferrari power team. So that they're related to them. So that could be why, but we won't know that yet. But anyway, just great for him to finish off his career on a high note, knowing that he was the last point scorer. Because if he didn't score, if no one scored this race, he would be the last Sauber point scorer. So just great for him, though. I mean, yeah, they're probably not gonna get to Williams because they would need 13 points. They would need 14 points to get ahead of Williams. So, and that's what Williams didn't score. So we don't really know about that, but anything could happen. You never know. Abu Dhabi definitely has had some chaos. And actually, that was only 2021, but there's chaos can happen there. So we'll see. So anyway, that will do it for your general race recaps as we head into the final race weekend of the year in 2024. Man, I feel like this, I don't know if it's y'all, but I feel like this season just really flew by, man. Like, I mean, it was 24 races. We're in the 24th race just in 2 days. And just the fact that F1's going to look very different next year, which we'll get more into later. But man, just what a season. I mean, like this was a great year to watch. Just so many battles. Like there was actually competitive racing for the lead. It wasn't just one team dominating. So it was a very great year. But anyway, now we'll have to get into some news regarding Abu Dhabi, which is going on now. As I said, we've had first 2 practice sessions have happened today. So we go over FP1 because obviously there was a lot of rookies. So we'll go over the rookies. So the rookies that we would see in this race was Luke Browning, which was Luke Browning for Williams, who was in the driver academy, Arthur Leclerc, who was in the Ferrari family, he's F2, and yes, brother of Charles Leclerc. We have Ayumu Iwasa, one of the Red Bull juniors. He would drive the Racing Bulls. We would have Isaac Hadjar, who was in the Red Bull. He's also one of their juniors. We'd have Ryo Hirakawa from McLaren Mercedes. He, I believe, was recently promoted to their academy there. And then we would have Felipe Drugovich, who actually got in the top 10 in the Aston Martin, so great showing from him. He's always been rumored to have a lot of seats, but he does not have one still. So yeah, that was all the. So we had a lot of rookies now. Okay, I would say Jack Doohan, but Jack Doohan is racing this weekend, so technically he wouldn't count. Now, I think he still would have drove FP1 even if he wasn't officially in the seat, but obviously he technically is racing this weekend, so we can't say that he is. But one point I do want to go over is that, as you noticed, Arthur Leclerc and Charles Leclerc drove in the same weekend for the same car. Now, that was actually the first time that any brothers have driven in any session of F1. And I remember I saw on Instagram there was like a shot of them driving like they're driving right. Like one's like they're like 1, 2, they're right with each other, and that was like a great shot seeing 2 brothers on the same track. Obviously, Leclerc was kind of slower because obviously Leclerc, Arthur was sore because obviously this is one of his first times in an F1 car, so obviously he's not going to be with Charles Leclerc's level. But man, their dad Hervé would be so proud, man. It really pains me that Hervé was not allowed to see this. I mean, if you don't know, Hervé Leclerc was the dad of them. And we all know, we've heard, Leclerc always talk a lot about him, especially after he won Monaco this year. It just really sucks that he wasn't allowed to see that. To see both of his sons driving a Ferrari in the FP1. That would have been such a sight. It was a great sight to see. But obviously, we have a good thing there. I mean, obviously, so as I said, Leclerc was in first place. He had the fastest lap in FP1 with a 1:21.321. Top 5 was Lando Norris, Lewis Hamilton, Russell, and Gasly. So the Mercedes look very strong again, and Pierre Gasly is very continuing his comments. Like, he's been doing really well in the Alpine. Hulkenberg, nice showing from Haas in 6th and 8th. Magnussen was in 8th. Prego Colapinto in 7th for Williams. Felipe Drugovich, F1 driver for Aston Martin, was in 9th place. And Sergio Perez, still a bit off the pace, in 10th place. So yeah, Perez continues to struggle there. I mean, here's the thing. You look at his time. So he said a 1:25.483, and Hadjar, who was also in the Red Bull, he said a 1:25.87. How are you only 4/10 ahead of him? I mean, Isaac Hadjar, I mean, he has driven in F1 sessions. I mean, it's not like his first time in an F1 car, which is probably why he was one of the higher runners of them. But you're only 4/10 ahead of a guy who has barely driven an F1 car, and I'm pretty sure Perez has been driving since 2011. Like I don't know what's going on with him. Like, it's just funny. Like, no one knows what's going on with Perez. Like, we cannot figure it out. Like, what's going on with him? Like, I don't know what happened, but that crash in Baku has destroyed him. He has not been the same since that crash in Baku. So we don't know, but we'll get more into that stuff. So now going on to practice 2, which was a bit later in the day, it'd be a bit of a change, as both McLarens were the fastest, as Lando would have a 1:23.517, and Piastri would set a 1:23.751, and Hulkenberg was third with a very impressive 1:23.97. It'd be Sainz 4th, Hamilton 5th, Charles Leclerc 6th, Bottas in the Kick-Sauber 7th, Magnussen in 8th, Albon in 9th, and Tsunoda in 10th. So both RBs were in the 10th and 11th, very close to each other. Pierre Gasly a bit more down the grid, but still a very fast lap for the Alpine. Very good, as he was doing very good there. And Colapinto would be in 20th with the slowest time, as obviously that was his first session, so he's probably not going to be there. Lance Stroll in 18th. And it seems like Red Bull still struggling, as Perez was only 14th and Verstappen was only 17th, so it's still not good showing from Red Bull there. And Zhou Guanyu would have a fairly impressive lap, as he was 15th, so decent place for the Kick-Sauber. And then, obviously, Aston Martin continues their struggles. They were 60th and 18th. So kind of a bit of a mixed-up FP2, I guess some of you would say. So that'll do your recap for a lot of the races this week. So now, to end off my show, we're going to go over a bit of kind of drivers, because obviously we all know next year is going to be very, very different. We have a lot of new drivers coming in. One of them actually already is Jack Doohan. One of them already is in. But there's just a lot, and I want to kind of get my take on it. Now, I think the one that most people have had, the one that has been talked about the most for probably the past 2 years now, has been Sergio Perez. Should he keep his seat? Now, it's a very tough question, because when you look at the past couple races, he's actually the reason that Red Bull was eliminated from the Constructors' Championship when they actually were leading it. Red Bull was actually leading it for quite a bit of the year before McLaren took over. But then they couldn't keep up because Perez just could not score points. It seemed like he was either crashing or just could not get into the points. And if he was barely getting into it. So obviously, he's been the main question because, I mean, even if Red Bull isn't the fastest, they're in the top 3 of fastest cars every weekend. They're going to be at the worst 4th, which is still a decent points contending car which could get podiums. I don't believe Perez. I don't think Perez has gotten a podium since China. That was the 5th race of the year. He has not gotten a podium in months. It just begs the question, just what happened? like if you watch this dude, like if you watched him like in his racing point in like early Red Bull days, like he was amazing. I mean, he was called the Mexican Minister of Defense because of that Abu Dhabi performance when he was defending off Hamilton, which allowed Verstappen to catch up. Obviously, we know how that ended, not because of him, but it was still a great moment. Like he was he was actually regarded as like very good. And in 2020 and 2022, he was showing. I mean, he was a bit back, but he was showing that he was competitive. He was still picking up decent points. He was getting podiums when he could. But I think but then 2023 came around, and he won and Verstappen and Perez, they split. They won 2 each races at the beginning of the year. And Perez was just behind him. And there was like actually articles saying like, could this be like the title fight? Could this be the guy that finally challenges Hamilton? Because it seemed, Verstappen. Because it seemed like people were trying to wonder who it would be. And we thought that it could be Perez that did it. But then after that weekend, I think it was after Miami 2023 when just everything went downhill. Because that was when they kind of favored Verstappen the strategy, and he would get first, and Perez got second, and it would never get any closer than what it was going to Miami. But it's like, just what happened? But like, it's like we just don't know. Like, something happened to Perez, and we just cannot figure it out. Like, nobody knows what happened. Like, it just seems like everything just crumbled apart. And it's like Red Bull have just tried to still keep him because apparently he brings a lot of sponsors in. But like, when is Red Bull going to say enough's enough? Like, I'm sorry. If I was Horner, I would have probably gotten rid of him. I mean, okay. 2023, I don't think 2023 because he was still getting podiums at the end of the year. So I don't think then. I think I would have at least given him 2024. But dude, halfway through the year, I'm getting rid of him. I would have gotten rid of him immediately. And then there's also, like, if you look at what he's doing, like he's barely holding on to 7th in the constructors in the driver championship, and your other driver just won the thing while holding off some of the best drivers. Like, Perez is like fighting Haas's and Alpines. I mean, the Red Bull has ever been the best the whole year, but you cannot justify battling those cars who are midfield cars. Perez is making a good car midfield car. Like, Verstappen is the opposite. Like, Verstappen was dragging that car. Like, especially like the half of the year when it was kind of struggling. He was dragging that thing to podiums and scraping every point he could get. Perez couldn't do it. And it's like, if Verstappen was able to hold onto the championship for that long, and Perez would never match him. And the one race he was actually doing better than him, Baku, he had that crash on the last lap, and he has not been the same since. He's like, when will Red Bull say enough's enough? Like, we all know Red Bull has had that huge history. Like, you remember how Verstappen got into the Red Bull seat after race 4 in 2016 with Daniel Kvyat? We all know how that went. So, like, Red Bull has always had a habit of being very quick to get to the drivers, and it worked. I mean, we had Gasly, who was there for half a year, and now Albon was able to stay for a year and a half. He was able to actually stay a bit longer, but he wasn't putting up the results, and they kicked him out. So why are they doing it to Perez? Like, is it the sponsor he brings in? Because that's what most people believe. But it's like, if you look at a driver who has caused you so much damage that they said they couldn't upgrade the car. They said they could not upgrade it because of all the damage he's had. You can't make your car any faster, so what justifies you keeping him just because of money? Perez was never a pay driver. I mean, if you look at the year he had before the Red Bull, he like that Racing Point, he was doing very good. In 2021, he was doing good. 2022, he was good. But it just seems like he's just not the same driver again. And we just cannot seem to figure out what happened. His last win was Baku 2023, which is probably almost 2 years ago, which is probably over a year and a half ago. So but the fall from grace he's had is just, like, it's just crazy, the downfall he's had. And honestly, there's been speculation and the people that assume And people think the reason they brought Lawson in was to try to replace him. Because I think what they would do if Perez was dropped is that they would put Sonoda in there because Sonoda has waited long enough to get that. Sonoda has proven that he's always been the superior RB driver. Like with any driver he's had, he's been the superior one. They'll keep Lawson. They'll probably put like maybe Isaac Hadjar or one of their juniors in the other V car because I don't think they're going to bring Ricardo back. They probably won't do that. They're probably not going to bring Ricardo back, so they're probably going to do like Hadjar. Maybe they'll put Joe for all I know in there, but essentially, I think the reason they brought Lawson in was to just have another RB driver that would be there like after Max, because obviously we all know Max. I mean, he's only 27, so he'll probably stay there for a while, but I mean, even he said that he's kind of getting bored of F1 even with the championship, so he might not be there for much longer. And obviously, they can have Lawson who can prepare for a couple of years, finally get to the Red Bull seat. I mean, that's just what I think. I could be wrong though. So yeah, that's really the main point people have. That's what I think they should do. I think they should get rid of him. I mean, like listen, like he's a nice guy. Like I know he has like the never give up catchphrase, which I do like, but unfortunately, you're not doing the job, man. And I remember Max, he said it best in Art to Survive. I mean, if you're not performing, you're out. But it really just seems like his sponsor money is the reason he's still there. And obviously money was a huge part in F1, and we are definitely seeing that right now. And then obviously we have both Sauber seats, which are both gone to Bottas and Zhou. So both of them have not declared where they're going. We don't know where Bottas is, and I mean reports that Guan Yu is going to the Ferrari reserve driver. We don't know about that yet, but as of this moment, we have not confirmed where either of them are going. Obviously, Hulkenberg is joining Gabriele Bortoleto, who is a top F2 driver this year, is going to be in that seat. And then we'll have Haas, which is going to be filled by Esteban Ocon and Ollie Behrman. I mean, Ocon's been very good, not great in Alpine, but he's a very talented driver. He can bring Haas up there. And Ollie Behrman has definitely showed his potential. He's going to be a great young talent. He's probably going to maybe the next Ferrari guy after Hamilton leaves. Like I definitely can see Ollie Behrman kind of being like the next Ferrari guy to join Leclerc after Hamilton leaves, because we all know Hamilton's getting old. He's not going to be here for much longer. He might be there for like maybe 2 years, maybe 3, and then they'll probably bring Behrman in because he's kind of like their Charles Leclerc right now. I mean, he's only 18, so I mean and Max is gonna be 22 at max by the time Hamilton leaves, and he'll get the Ferrari seat if he can perform. Which, I mean, he has. I don't see why he wouldn't. I definitely do see him getting that seat. And then, obviously, Alpine's still the same. Red Bull at this moment still the same. I mean, Williams, they're going to have Carlos Sainz joining them. Which, I mean, I think Williams could be on the rise. I mean, they've had a kind of tough year this year, but I think next year would really be the assessment of James Vowles. Because, I mean, James Vowles, he's at least made the car, like, decent. I mean, he's at least not made him, like, complete back markers anymore. He's made a midfield, I guess, which is kind of a slow progress. But I think next year is going to be the true test of him because you have Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon, two very capable drivers. So that's going to be the true test of him. And obviously, we all know the big one is Lewis Hamilton going to Ferrari. And that's going to be tough because Ferrari right now could be one of the top teams. And there's always been that debate of who do you want. If one of them would win the title, who would you want? It's like kind of red pill. It's like kind of red pill, blue pill. Because you look at it, you have Charles Leclerc, first title. He's Ferrari's golden boy. He's been chasing it. He's been second so many times. He's been runner up third. He's been chasing it, just hasn't quite gotten it. But could it finally be the year that he breaks through? Or you have Hamilton, was with Mercedes for 7 years, was battling Ferrari, overcame them, moving to Ferrari to try to get a new challenge, to get his 8th and officially beat Michael Schumacher for winning the most F1 championships in a career. It's a tough one to pick. Like it is really tough to pick which one you want. And a lot of us can't figure it out. I don't know. I mean, it's so tough, man. Like I don't know. That's round of your silly season news. I don't think we're gonna have team principal. I don't think we're gonna have team principal silly season like we did a couple years ago. But anyway, that will do it. That will do it for episode 2 of the American Speed F1 podcast. I'm Anthony Doria. Thank you for listening, and join me next week for episode 3 as we wrap up the 2024 season. And good night, everybody. Have a good day.